Welcome to WorkYogi Diaries. I'm your host, Santosh Shiva. A quick introduction about myself. I am from Bangalore, India, but I live in Houston, Texas now. For the last 25 plus years, I've been working in the technology consulting as a sales professional. Please join me every week to hear stories about people finding self expression through their work. So, why this show? Because we spend a major part of our life at work of some kind. It's a journey. It's a journey of ups and downs, self discovery, and finding one's groove over a period of time. Stories of everyday folks finding their groove through work is worth telling and listening to. And hopefully, we can take back some inspiration to our own lives. My guest today is someone who reminds me of this very popular quote that I love. It goes, "All those who wander are not lost," by J.R.R. Tolkien. Consider this. She starts off with a degree in medicine, gives it up to do a master's in molecular biology in UT Austin, then decides she's made for business and creating new possibilities, and then therefore completes her management degree in UT Austin. And then finally finds her purpose. The dots connect. To find out about what those connected dots revealed, give this a listen. We explore how it all started, key pivots in her life, and what they taught her, dealing with big changes and yet staying committed to one's journey and dreams. And finally, now that she is home, what's next? Let's welcome Nishi Vishwanathan. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to it so you get the latest updates. Hit like if you like this video and leave your comments. Let us know if you took something away from this conversation. Hey Nishi, welcome to WorkYogi Diaries.
Hey, how are you doing? This is great. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. You know, you have a very fascinating story, work story, about choices you've made and how you've kind of navigated throughout your career. But there is also a thread. So we're going to talk about that and what's behind those choices, and which our viewers, I'm sure, will find fascinating in terms of your own journey and how you kind of built your career. So before that, I'm going to let you do a quick personal introduction, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, so some call it fascinating, I call it crazy, but whatever, right? So I am Nishi Vishwanathan, and I work for Dell Medical School, which is a part of the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm the director of an innovation program there. It's called Texas Health Catalyst. So that's me, and then I can tell you a little bit more about my work as we go, but I guess that should be a good enough introduction.
We got to first get into a flashback,
Yep.
and
It's
then
a
and then
long,
work.
long flashback. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So let's start there, right? So um, you started as a with a degree in medicine, right? Way back. So let's hear about why medicine and what was behind that choice.
You mean I had other choices?
Engineering, law,
Yeah,
or be
exactly.
a
Right. Yeah,
or be in
yeah. I
Bollywood.
know. No, not you know that better than anyone else, right? So obviously, like if you grew up in India and you did well in school, there were probably only two options, right? And then if you're a female, then it actually also tilts more towards medicine. So interestingly, of course, there is that parental and that societal expectation, if you want to call it that. But I would say part of it also was my fault because it was always an aspiration for me as well. So it wasn't like I did it because they told me to. That was just part of it. So I keep joking about it, but I really wanted to do it, right? I wanted to be in healthcare mainly because I feel like it's a great field to make an impact, right? So if somebody wants to help out the world, then what better place to be in than healthcare? So that was always number one for me, to kind of make a difference. It sounds very cliched, but it was true. So and then I wouldn't say it was easy to get into medical school. It was definitely hard, but it wasn't, you know I, like I'm just trying to think about how much I studied, and I'm comparing that with some of the kids today, right? Like where they stay awake until 2 a.m. in the night and stuff like that. I've never done any of that. I used to sleep on time, wake up on time. So it didn't feel to me as if it was a Herculean task when it happened. So getting into medical school obviously felt like a huge thing, right? It's a big success for everybody. And then, but that was just the beginning, right? Once I got in, I was again, the academic part, that wasn't a problem. I always actually loved it. I still love making diagnoses. So a lot of people come to me with even now with their symptoms, and they tell me a lot of things, and I love that detective work, if you want to call it that, and make a diagnosis. But the part that actually killed me literally is the sadness around, right? So medical school, you're very young. In the US, you typically spend 4 years in undergrad and then go into medical school. So you've actually really decided that you want to be there, and you're an actual adult by the time you get there. Whereas in India, you start really early, and then you get pounded with, a lot of sadness. So especially this was Mumbai Tertiary Care Center, one of the top in India, top ones in India. And a lot of people, almost it felt like they came there to die, right? So that I couldn't take, because the first couple of years when you're in medicine, they make it very, very glamorous. They make it sound like you're saving lives, and they talk about empathy, and there is a lot of that conversation.
Yeah.
But when you actually start clinical medicine, you realize that when the rubber hits the road, it's just do do do. There is no feeling, there is no empathy, there is not much of that, because there is no time, right? So this is a place where once you have an emergency day, the next day there would be patients on the floor because there is no space for them on the beds, right? So it's that kind of life. So where is the time to kind of talk to people and understand their feelings and things like that? So that was one piece of it. And I would say 50-50%, right? So that was 50%. The remaining 50% was that, like I said, I like to diagnose, but whatever came after that was super repetitive. So there was this prescriptive formula that you had to use after you had diagnosed. So that did not sit well with me, because I am by nature a very creative person. I want to try different things. I want to make mistakes, and I'm adventurous that way. So this didn't leave room for that type of decision making. So I felt a little bit frustrated that I wasn't able to do that, right? So some people say I left medicine because I did not get intellectually challenged, and I believe that's not true. Like there is a lot that's intellectually challenging about medicine, but I think it's more about the you don't have a lot of possibilities at every node, right? Because there is a lot already written, and you have to just follow that. So those were really the two big reasons why I decided to kind of pivot a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess we started with why medicine, and what I hear is you were allured by the fact that it's a profession that makes a difference. And it seems like fast forward in your journey, or 4 or 5 years of your studying, there was disillusionment creeping in. And one thing I wanted to ask you was, so where did you get this idea that medicine makes a difference? Was there somebody who inspired you? Was it in the family? Was it in your society, in your community? Was there someone that you looked up and said, "Oh, that's he or she is a doctor"? And was there somebody like that?
Yeah. So actually, my cousin is a cardiologist. So he was, and he's actually like, he's 10 years older than me, actually, more than that. So he was always an inspiration for me, right? So he was doing really well again at med school. He was a gold medalist, and then he specialized and super specialized and all that. And I felt like, yeah, I mean, that's what I want to do, right? This is the person that I want to become. So that is, so it's not like anybody told me, but it is that respect that you get
Yeah.
for saving lives. And that's really like, I mean, for a young person who doesn't understand the world yet, it's definitely
Yep.
very appetizing to go that way, right?
Oh yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And your disillusionment with what you thought and what was there. When did this happen? Was it towards the end of? And in India, the medical degree is 5 years, right? And so this happened. What is your fourth year, fifth year? When did this disillusionment creep in?
I would say starting about 3.5 years, it started happening, because that's when you actually like start doing a lot of clinical stuff, right? Before that, it's a little bit more bookish. So you're learning about different molecules, and you're learning biochemistry. You're dissecting cadavers. So there is really not that much human interaction going on. But the moment that starts, that's when it descends on you, right? It's very, very heavy. Like even now, when I walk into a hospital, to me it's one of the saddest places in the world, right? So that's what happened.
Okay, terrific. So, well, you pivoted, and it's a big decision to pivot from something you're invested so heavily on. 5 year degree, it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot to get into medicine in India, and we all know very few get in, limited seats. So now you make a decision to pivot, right? And you move to the United States. So tell us about that. What was going on in your mind, and what were you thinking? What next for you? Was there a period of confusion, chaos? What was going on?
Yeah, so the moment I decided I'm not cut out for this, if you want to say that, I had already set my mind on the next best thing, right? I thought, okay, if not clinical, then maybe I need to do something in research and innovation. So that was my next thing, which sounded very logical, because if you think about it, it's still in that same realm, but it's definitely a lot more possibilities at every step, right? Because you can decide what you want to study, and within that, you can decide what you want to do. Everything is about running experiments and finding out if things work or not. So it was, it made a lot of sense at that time. And it's funny, right? Like life always has other plans for you. Everything, like I always tell people, it's always a mix of it's a lot of planning, but then there is also the serendipity factor, right? So all this is like all logical stuff. It made sense, and I went into it. I got into UT Austin. It was a master's program. But then fate took us back to India. And in India, I wasn't able to find, this was back in 2004, and that too in Bangalore, which is not a biotech hub by any means, right? So I wasn't able to find things that matched with my skill sets that I had developed. So I wanted to forge a career in research. I wanted to work with a pharma company, possibly, or a biotech company. But those opportunities were, they were very nascent at the time. Right now, maybe things are a little bit different. So that led me to my next step, right? So even that didn't work out. I changed more. And I think this will be a theme in this whole conversation, right? How lots of changes keep happening every couple of years, I guess.
So what did you do? So when you couldn't find something that met what you wanted to do, what did you decide? What did you do that time?
Yeah, so I decided I couldn't, of course, not do anything. So that was never a possibility for me. So I happened to meet a couple of Americans who had moved to India to start a company. So this was a very timely meeting for them as well, because they appreciated the fact that I had lived here, and they knew that I knew their culture, and then I also knew the Indian culture, right? So, and they were visionaries in the sense that they had a lot of dreams for social entrepreneurship. And actually, today, the company is doing really, really well. It's actually set up in Shillong in Meghalaya. And there is a lot of workforce training that's happening. And people are trained, people are educated in new things that they would otherwise never had access to, right? And they are working with global companies. So these people, they were so inspiring that when I met them, I said, okay, if they are starting something, and I am by nature, I'm a builder, I want to keep building something all the time, and that appealed to me a lot. And one thing that actually appealed to me was, it was a little bit on the content side of things. So we were a B2B services company, and we did both content and design services. And this was the era of outsourcing, where a lot of projects were sent to India, and they were executed completely in India, right? So we dealt with content and design outsourcing. And I used to write a lot back in school and back in medical school. I used to publish a little bit here and there. So there was that connection. So sometimes I like to joke, when I was really young, there was a point where I would be frustrated with, like, oh, I have to study so much, let me not become a doctor, let me become a writer, right? So there was this one phase in my life where I had always wanted to do that. And sometimes my parents would say, oh, you know what, you can always become a doctor and then become a writer, but the reverse is not true, right? So that made me feel like, yeah, I mean, I should probably just keep pursuing my pathway in medicine. But then this was a novel opportunity for me to explore that as well. And like I said, I'm an explorer, so I couldn't hold myself back, and that journey began.
That's to be something to be written down, explorer. And that's a great mindset for anyone who's listening to this. Be exploring. That's a great mindset. And you never know what possibilities are around the corner. And your story so far is already full of possibilities and exploration. And so you started writing. What kind of writing was it? Was it a specific genre, or uh, did you look at medical writing those days?
A little bit, but our primary focus was actually not medical writing. It was sometimes it was travel writing. So travel writing was great for me because travel is another one of my passions. So it helped me combine that. But we used to do all kinds of writing, right? Business, travel, just very, very general stuff, including, like, we have even populated an entire website, so which is like all about just driving and how to drive and all that. So it's very, very broad, but my role was more on the management side, if you want to say that. I was writing very less. In fact, it was more about building, marketing, making sure that our website was all set up, we had enough content. And this was, again, very, very early days of online marketing, right? So when there wasn't that term actually evolved when I was working with Chili Breeze. So I was doing a lot of online marketing back then, when most people didn't even know what online marketing was. Again, same thing, right? Explorer, learner. So I enjoyed doing that because there was no playbook or anything like that. So I had to define what I wanted to do and then just do it. And luckily, my partners, they gave me all the freedom in the world to do whatever I wanted. So this was basically managing the writers, managing client expectations. So basically, as you know, when you're in a small company, no one does one thing, everybody does everything, right? So that's what happened at Chili Breeze. But the good thing was, I learned a lot about how to how to start a company, how to run a business, how to stay profitable, because if you don't, then you're dead, right? So that those things, those skills, I would have otherwise never learned in business. I mean, in medical school, right? They don't teach you that in medical school. So that was a great learning experience.
And all this is in the span of you finish your medical grad, and what, about 10 years window after that, all this is happening.
Yeah, yeah. Within the
So,
first,
right, in the 10 years after you finish your med school, you have decided to pivot out of medicine. You've gone done a master's in totally a different, related, but a
yeah,
more scientific science area of science. And then you come back and you're doing a supervisory role in a content marketing company. I mean, it's
yeah,
it's a bizarre but at the same time fascinating story, especially for people who think career as a linear progression,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And especially in today's time, if you look at some of the big career pundits giving advice, one thing that's out is lifetime employment in any company.
Mm. Mhm.
Uh, Possibly also out is lifetime careers, because every 5 years there's disruption, there's change. And what you have done is a great example of what's relevant today. Because if you're able to every 3 to 5 years reinvent yourself, do something different, that's what every career pundit is asking people to be prepared for. So something to be noted down here.
But I mean, like I said, only part of it is intentional, right? Some of it is just looking at opportunities. And sometimes I feel like it's good to be a little bit foolish as well.
Yeah,
Because if you are not, then you will always be scared, right? You will
yeah,
always be like, oh, maybe this will take my career in a direction that I don't want it to go. But I feel like a little bit of fearlessness and foolishness is good in terms of I don't know if I would say that this is exactly what I would do if I were given the chance again, but I don't regret any of it either, right? So I've learned a lot through all these different experiences and had different careers in a span of couple of decades, right? So that's something that I am very happy that I did.
yeah. And it's a great takeaway for people who are listening to this, right? And that these templates of old templates of career are not relevant. And that's a struggle for most people, because every 5 years, there are new people coming into workforce, and there are new professions being created, like digital marketing. Today is the hot profession. It didn't exist, maybe 7, 8, 10 years ago. YouTubing is a profession.
Mhm.
People are making a killing out of YouTubing. And so, as an example, I'm saying, so what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It's very relevant. And so now, moving forward, you finished content marketing. That was one chapter, and then you also went ahead and did your master's, your MBA, right?
Mhm.
In UT, Macomb, which is again a very well-known, reputed, management school in the US. So tell us about that. What was behind that?
Yeah. So actually, that's where the purposefulness kicks in, right? So after doing this for a few years, I realized that, okay, now this is getting a little crazy. I have three disparate experiences. I have clinical, I have research, and I have entrepreneurship and business, right? But there has to be some weaving together of those. Otherwise, it's going even more haywire after that. So that's when I decided to get an MBA. And so again, like I didn't want to do an evening or an exec MBA or anything like that because I felt like I needed that full experience. So I did take the plunge and got a full-time MBA. And those 2 years were definitely pretty hard in the sense that a lot of time management and all that is required, especially with a kid, right? So that wasn't easy, but I would say I am so thankful that at that point in my life I decided to do that, because just the fact that I had that medical background and that I have an MBA, that is enough to open a lot of doors, right? So I'm thankful that I made that decision at that point. So yes, so the MBA was primarily to marry everything together. And the idea was, after that I do want to work for industry, because I had, by working at Chili Breeze, I had already become fascinated with the world of business. I felt like, I mean, that is what I'm cut out for. Now I can do any role within that. It could be like marketing or finance. I don't really care what I'm doing, but it's that world of business that appealed to me a lot. So that's why I made that decision. And during my MBA, there was a conundrum, right? Austin is not like, at least back in those days, we had barely any biotech or healthcare companies. Whereas I wanted to specialize in that area, although I wanted to acquire those general MBA types of skills, I didn't want to go into, let's say, a tech company or something like that, because that was not my forte. My forte was healthcare, and I can think clinically, I can think from a research perspective. So what I did was I would go to these small companies and do a lot of consulting with them, and they really appreciated the help,
Mm,
because
mm,
they found it very hard to find an MBA with that background, right? They would get approached by others, but those people would not have the background that they needed in, let's say, molecular biology or clinical medicine or anything like that. So it helped a lot to have that background. And then through all that work and through getting involved in some entrepreneurial organizations, that's how I actually found my next, step after the MBA. It was a small company called Nano Hybrids, and they brought in a little bit of funding, and they had already worked with me for a while during my MBA, and they said, why don't you come in as a business person? So I was actually the only business person in the company. It was a very, very biotech, nanotechnology type of company with everybody doing mostly the science. But I was responsible for setting up things. Like we had to actually set up our entire lab, which meant that everything from buying equipment to renting space and setting up internet and things like that, to doing a lot of the marketing activities for the startup. And also, of course, I had to do a bunch of business development as well, because we were trying to develop a product for the clinical space, which meant that we had to partner a lot. So I would joke back then that, I mean, because I was the only business person in the startup, on one day I would be setting up trash for the company. On another day, I would be talking to Genentech about a partnership, right? So it was interesting, again, the whole gamut of what you get to do when you're with a smaller company. There's no one role. And again, like as you can see, there is a theme developing here already, right? I love to do different things. I love to multitask, and I love to learn. A lot of times, I don't think ever in my career anybody has sat me down and said, here is what I need you to do. A lot of times they say, here is what I want to achieve, and then I figure out what to do to get there, right? So that mostly that's how it has been.
Yeah. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And also, I think, in the world of business, it's all about outcomes and results. And yes, uh, you are definitely someone who's open to new experiences, trying new things. But it looks like you were also delivering outcomes, because otherwise, no one was going to trust you with stuff. And what I'm hearing also, Nishi, is that the dexterity or that you have developed over the years, because you've played with such different domains. You have the ability to shift between different
Mhm.
domains and get the job done, right? And and I think, again, that's something, again, to be noted, and I think the viewers will find very useful, is that's another competency that we all are well served to develop, because if you're stuck with one thing, I think you can be automated,
Yeah,
right?
yep,
But if
that's
you're
true.
someone who's dexterous, someone who's able to go through multiple domains and play around with it, I think your value especially in a business setting, is a lot more.
Mm.
So those are great points. Yeah, please continue. Then what happened? So nanotechnology happened, and then I guess
Yeah,
that's probably the next chapter, which is what you're doing today.
yep, exactly. So again, it's all, none of it is like completely disconnected, right? So when we were at that company, we found it really, really hard to form clinical partnerships, right? So industry would talk to us. Like I have spoken with a lot of top companies during that time, because they would all be interested in the cutting edge technology, and we would be able to have those conversations. But clinical, like it was so hard because Austin did not have a medical school, so there weren't too many academic oriented clinicians. Most of them were just kind of like, they used to practice medicine. They had not much to do with innovation or research. So even if they talked to us, it was like, okay, I'll charge you $300 an hour and I'll talk to you like once a year or something, and I'm your clinical advisor. So that just didn't sit well, because obviously when you're developing a product, which is what we were doing that for different spaces within that area. You have to be talking to your customers, right? Because why would you build anything without knowing what those unmet needs are? And that was the hardest part for us, and I found that really frustrating. So when Dell Medical School got set up, there was this article that got published saying, if you want to talk to doctors, then come and see us, right? So I said, wow, okay, this is good. I should go and talk to them. And then I met the vice dean here at the med school, and she laughed because she said, "Hey, this was the journalist misinterpreting what I said. I said eventually we will have doctors, but right now we are like 15 people and we are just trying to start the med school. So it's very, very early days." But then I just started talking with her, and she said, "I am starting this program, and it's an innovation program where we want to bring researchers together with clinicians so that it solves the precise problem that you're talking about." And I was immediately very fascinated. I said, "I mean, is there anything I can help with?" Right? So I don't want to quit my job or anything like that. But if you feel like, because I have been here, I've been in the life sciences industry in Austin, and the folks at the med school had just moved from California. So I said, I can help you all with something in Austin if needed. So all that triggered this thing of, why don't you work with us for a few hours a week and help kickstart this program? And then maybe when we hire the right person, you can go back to your usual thing. And I said, sure, that sounds like a great opportunity, because again, I'm a builder and this is a great chance, like starting from zero. So all the way from naming the program to like the structure and the criteria, and then like basically how the program would be run, right? So I designed all that along with the vice dean, and just it became two full-time jobs, right? Because there is no way one can actually like do both things together with basically equal passion and do justice to both those things together. So slowly I realized that uh, this is too good of an opportunity to pass up, because Dell Medical School is really the future of Austin. They are thinking differently about healthcare. And I quickly realized that. So I wanted to be part of it. So what I did was I went to the startup and I said, "Hey, here is the direction that I'm thinking, but I am not going to leave you all because I know that I'm the only business person." So I actually helped them hire another MBA and basically worked with him for a while as he learned all the stuff about what I was doing. Kind of, I would say maybe semi trained him in many ways, things like that, and then quit. So basically it wasn't like this whole thing of like leaving the company in the lurch and moving on, right? So I didn't want to do that because they were too small for me to leave them like that. So in fact, I am very thankful to the med school that they had the patience when I was doing all that, right? So they were like, sure, like, I mean, we understand that you can't just quit, and we'll give you 6 months to to just make sure that things are all okay when you leave. So luckily everything went well, and then I was able to transition in around 6 months, right? So that's kind of that story. And then it's just all the stuff that I'm doing right now, right? So I can definitely talk a little bit about the program and all that.
Yeah, yeah, we should please, because I think from what I gathered from what you're saying, essentially the program that you're running now connects, clinicians to researchers, so that incubation, innovation can be real rather than in a lab, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Let's hear about it from your side in terms of how this works. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So, I mean, right from the beginning, we knew that there are basically two big problems with healthcare innovation, right? So, one is there are too many hammers looking for nails. So, basically, you invent something in the lab and then you're trying to force fit that into something you think it will work for. So, you might say, I have this technology that can diagnose something, and then you're like, okay, diabetes is the disease which is making a lot of money right now, and then I'm going to diagnose something in diabetes now, regardless of whether the market needs that or not, or whether that's an unmet need or not, and then I'm pursuing that. And some of them work, some of them don't, right? So it's not like it shouldn't be done at all, but that's the model that most companies have been using traditionally. So slowly there is this movement towards, how do we start with an unmet need and then innovate around it, right? So that was one theme. And then the other theme, of course, is that unlike most other industries, healthcare is highly regulated, and there is a lot of disconnect between the end user and customer and payer, and there, the person making the purchasing decision is usually not the end user, and the person who's using the tool is really the doctor. That person is not the one benefiting, it's the patient. And who pays for all this? It's the insurance company. So it's all messed, completely messed up if you think about it, right? There's no direct connection between who benefits and who pays. So and given that, and then given that there are a lot of regulatory requirements, it becomes very challenging to take an idea to market. So our whole philosophy in the program is we will help you think about those steps upfront so that you don't struggle and flounder in the end, right? So you don't want to spend 5 years of your life doing something that's not an unmet need, or developing something where you have a really challenging commercialization pathway, and then no investor will touch you with a barge pole because the market opportunity is just not there. So we help figure that out pretty early. So we are working with people when they have inventions, when they have discoveries, and then we kind of chart out that pathway. We tell them your product might take 10 years to get to market. Are you okay with that? And then, things like that, right? And how do you get it to market? For example, if it's, let's say, if it's diagnosing something, then there are two ways to go about it. You make it, really, really accurate, or you make it like a screening type of tool. So there are so many nuances, and then all that will impact how much funding you have to raise and how many years it will take you to get to the market, whether your tool will be used. So there are a lot of dynamics there. And because we are close to clinicians and we have a huge industry network, we are able to connect those dots for people and offer them that consulting. So that's really the program.
Terrific. And what about AI and ML? Because the industry that I'm in, which we sell AI and ML to the medical community, especially medical devices. We're talking about more power on medical instruments, for example, because the processing power of computers increased so much, and sophistication of neural networks has increased so much.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a lot of action in that space?
Yes, a lot of action in terms of people trying to build solutions that leverage those. But the use case for healthcare, I mean, it's still limited to some use cases, right? Like, for example, taking a lot of imaging data and trying to figure out the diagnosis. So that is one example. And a lot of times also machine learning is useful when you're diagnosing cancer, for example. That's another field where it's used a lot. But as of now, a lot of people inside healthcare are very skeptical as to, can this be a broad brush? Like, what we are trying right now is we are trying to again do the same thing of hammers looking for nails, right? We are not trying to identify where in healthcare is this best used. We are trying to act as if it can be used for everything. So that is not something that doctors appreciate, and I've heard from a lot of them. And most of them as of now are, they are taking a very skeptical and guarded approach towards that. But there are certain fields, so radiology and pathology have definitely, like, they are number one in taking that. And then of course the medical device companies, because that gives them an edge, right? They are always competing with other medical device companies. So how do they sell to the customer? They can say, okay, I have this cool feature. So that's really why they are using it. So I personally, I am yet to see too much value, but I do believe that it's going to be there. It's just a matter of people understanding the best use cases and then applying the technology to those use cases, right? So right now the energy is just being spread too thin. That's what I think. But hopefully, yeah, I think the next 5 years will tell us if it'll be like the biggest thing, and whether it'll replace people and all that, that remains to be seen in healthcare especially.
Yeah, yeah. I'm encountering, for example, surgery is an area that is getting a lot of
Yeah.
attention from the AI and robotics space, and
Hmm.
especially now with image processing and compute power becoming more available. That's becoming, a lot of people are talking about that. So, from your personal perspective, so do you kind of have to work across the aisle with innovators, like people with ideas, the
Yeah.
and investment community as well as the medical community? Is that personally what you kind of end up
Yeah.
spending a lot of your time?
Exactly that, right? So we are trying to connect the dots between all of those. And interestingly, we can't be restricted to one specific healthcare domain. So we work on drugs, devices, diagnostics, and software as well, because all those fields you have innovation happening. But again, the philosophy is the same, right? How do you connect that with a clinical need, and how do you connect that with the business community? Now it could be a partnership with a large company, it could be an investment from a angel investor, it could be whatever. But the question is, each project is different, so what do you need to make your project successful? And we kind of dissect that and tell you what your next steps are, right? So and then we can help along the way as well. For example, if we tell somebody, hey, your next step is to apply for government funding, we can direct them to the appropriate resources if that's what the next step is.
Yep, yep. That is beautiful. I almost feel like when I hear your story, it's a story of someone who wanted to make a difference in healthcare, did not find it in one area, but eventually found it,
Yep.
right? And you are at home in what you're doing today, right? And it's been a journey, and but whatever you did, you loved doing it, and just kept picking up what opportunities came up, but you finally found what exactly you had in mind when you started medicine,
True, true. Yeah,
right?
I completely agree. In fact, a couple of years ago, I believe, was when my teenage daughter, she asked me, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I said, probably what I'm doing right now, right?
Yeah,
So you're right. Like, I think it took a while, but I like what I'm doing a lot.
yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful story. It's a great story. And obviously, all this requires especially for a woman, I think it requires a lot more of managing multiple commitments. So how do you manage that?
So I have always been a multitasker. So I can check email and work when I'm cooking. And so that has never, and in fact, in some ways I want to, right? So that's the funny part. Like I don't think I can ever do one thing at a time. So that has helped actually, because I can do like five things together and still be okay. And then, of course, so both my husband Girish and Malavika, my daughter, they are stable people. So it helps that they are stable so that I can be all over the place and I can do all these different things. And
Yeah,
so they stay logical and stable, right? And then, of course, I am very, very passionate about travel, about movies, and I wouldn't give up any of that for work, right? So I have to make sure that
yeah,
there is that time available to pursue those things as well, because otherwise life would be meaningless, right? It shouldn't be all about work either.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I think I absolutely. I mean, your work is definitely a central part of our life in general. On an average, most of us spend significant amount of our adult life at work of some kind, and that work's got to empower other areas of your life. So that's always a positive, and I think your example is a great testimony to that whole view, right? Great. That was a terrific conversation, Nishi. A lot of takeaways. I'm sure there's a lot of notes that we can take in what you've done and takeaways, so we can adopt some of those mindsets more than anything else. Mindset, because tactics can change, but mindsets is what you want to use. Want to move to the next part of our conversation, which is a rapid fire round. I have a bunch of questions I'm going to ask you, and it will be related to your work and your interests. And let's.
Okay,
You
cool.
ready for that?
Sure, sure.
All right, let's get to it. Go. So I know you kept saying travel a lot. So let's start with that.
Okay.
What's the place that you would want to visit once the pandemic is over?
Oh, Greece. That's my
Greece.
next. Yeah.
Wow. I had another guest today that I spoke with, and that person wants to go to Greece too. So
Okay.
Greece, a lot of people are coming your way.
Yeah.
I know you also like reading, right? You mentioned that. Top three books that's impacted your work life.
Wow. So I don't think I'm the right person to answer this question because I don't read self-help books. I only read fiction. So there's not much happening where my reading is connected with my work, right? So I don't know how to even answer that question. But I think one book that comes to mind is really what got you here won't get you there. I feel like that. I happen to read it. I typically don't. Maybe I was on a plane or something and I had nothing to read, so I read that. So that was a really good one because I do have some of those the tendencies that the book talks about, and it says, sometimes you can fall into these traps, and then that can prevent you from growing. So that was very helpful. But other than that, I really like, and then of course, I like the book Blink because I use that in my life, and it's not because I read Blink; it's just because I could relate to it when I read it, where it's almost like a lot of what I do is gut reaction, and then I make decisions that way as well. So I could totally relate to how people might make decisions that way, right? So those come to mind,
Understood.
but
And
unfortunately,
yeah,
yeah, not
and you can
much
pick the
else.
third one from your any book that you've read, but that's probably impacted your life and your general outlook or a general view. Is there something? Is there a
Yes,
favorite?
yes, yes. So actually, so there is a writer named Ruth Prawer Jabwala, and she wrote a book called My Nine Lives: Chapters of a Possible Past, and that influenced me a lot because what that book is really is, it's actually nine different people, and they are completely unrelated to each other. One of them might be, for example, a refugee from Austria, and another one might be like an American. But what she's done is all of them have her heart and soul, and they live similar lives, right? So one thing that kind of, I took away from that is that it really doesn't matter what your circumstances are or what fate, does with you and all that. You are who you are, and how you choose to react to something is going to define your life. It's not really where you are or how much money you have or which era you were born. And basically that taught me a lot, that it's a lot about your nature and your attitude, really.
Mhm. All right. Yeah, nice. Those are great recommendations, great books. All right, next one. Ready for the next one?
Mhm.
If you could win an Olympic medal for any sport, real or fake, what would it be?
God. I can tell you that I would not win any medal, leave alone an Olympic medal. I'm pathetic at sports, but one thing I love is swimming. So maybe that. I love swimming. I don't think I'm like ever going to compete, but yeah, I just like doing it.
The sport could be as bizarre as eating most chocolate in a day. That's fine too.
Okay. Okay.
But if it is swimming, it is swimming. That's fine. What was your favorite subject in school?
English.
All right.
Yeah, and then I
Literature?
would say my second was history. So English in anything, right? I love grammar, I love literature, and I love history as well. So it's mostly, I would say, I'm on the liberal arts side when it comes to what subjects I love.
That's very that's a very interesting that's an interesting dichotomy because your career is mostly science, but
Hmm.
your favorite subject was in liberal arts, which
Yep.
is fine. But it's an interesting irony.
Yep. It is. It is.
What's the best advice you ever got regarding work?
Yeah, actually, I can answer this because I always think about it, right? So there was this one point in my life when I was looking for my next thing after the MBA, and there were some roles that I saw which were more like project management and things like that, which I would say I could have easily done, but maybe I was not the right fit for it, right? So when I talked to these companies, I quickly realized that I would probably not be the right person, and then I was talking about this to one of my mentors, and she said, she talked to me a lot, and she said, you seem to be the kind of person who wants to write your own job description. You don't want to answer to somebody else's job description, right? So she said you need to realize that, and you need to look for those types of opportunities. So it's probably going to be things that are not even advertised yet, are in somebody's brain or whatever. But so, and then I was like, wow, like this lady has talked to me for like 30 minutes and she's able to tell that about me. That's amazing. And that already happened in my life before, right? So, and then it's happened again after that as well. So I would say that to me was the best advice, because that applies to everybody. Just know who you are and then look for something, right? Instead of just randomly looking. Like, first, I guess, understand what you're good at and what you would enjoy doing, and then things will automatically come to you.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Hey, that's Nishi. So we're kind of coming to the end of this conversation. It was very enlightening, and to hear about your work journey. I want to give you the last word. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up?
No, thank you very much. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks for joining the show. Have continued to do the great work you're doing. Hope you continue to, prosper with the amazing work that you're doing in the healthcare industry. So have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you. Bye.